The planet Valora was beautiful once. Its oceans shimmered in soft silver light, its forests glowed faintly under twin moons, and its people lived in calm harmony. But that peace was ending. Now storms tore across the skies. The once blue clouds had turned into ash and fire. The ground cracked with heat. The very air was becoming poison. For years, the Valorans had watched their world fade. They were a gentle race, thin, tall, with luminous eyes that showed emotion more clearly than words. They were known across the stars as artists, scholars, and dreamers. They built cities that floated on light and sang songs that could calm the hearts of predators. But beauty could not stop destruction. Their atmosphere was collapsing. Their energy fields were failing, and their technology, peaceful and delicate, was not built for survival. The Valoran Council gathered in their last shining city, Tarath, which hovered over a dying sea. The High Speaker, her silver skin pale with worry, stood before the council. "We have sent over 50 distress calls," she said softly, "to the Elendari Republic, to the Core Alliance, even to the Nomad fleets. No one answers." The council chamber was silent. Some members looked down in shame. Others stared into the holographic map that showed their world surrounded by fading satellites. "Maybe they cannot hear us," one counselor whispered. "Or maybe," another said bitterly, "they have decided that Valora is already lost." The High Speaker's voice trembled. "We cannot give up. There must be someone out there who will listen." And so, with what little power remained, they sent one final signal, a cry across the stars, a message of desperation, carrying their coordinates and a simple plea. "To any who hear this, our world is dying. Please help us." Days passed, then weeks. The skies grew darker, and the people of Valora began to prepare for the end. Families gathered in temples to sing their final songs. Children asked if the stars would take them somewhere safe. Then one night a deep sound echoed through the air, a sharp, unnatural roar that made the very ground shake. Valorans ran into the open, shielding their eyes from a blinding white light cutting through the clouds. Something was entering their atmosphere. Something small, metallic, and burning like a falling star. The council watched from the tower balcony as the object slowed, engines screaming until it landed roughly outside the city, crushing part of the crystal plains. The guards aimed their energy staves, unsure whether this was rescue or invasion. When the smoke cleared, they saw a ship, not sleek like Elendari vessels, not elegant like core crafts. This one looked rough. Its hull was scratched, dark, and patched in many places. Letters were painted on the side, crude and faded. UES Venture, Earth Expeditionary Corps. The council looked at each other, confused. "Earth?" someone murmured. Another gasped. "The Deathworld!" Every schoolchild knew of it. A planet where gravity crushed, where animals had claws and teeth beyond reason, where nature itself seemed to want everything dead. The humans who came from that place were considered half-myth, violent, unpredictable, and too dangerous to approach, and yet, here they were. The landing ramp lowered with a hiss, and the first human stepped out. He wore dark armor scratched with use, his face half covered by a breathing mask. His eyes scanned the environment with calm precision. Behind him came two others, one carrying a heavy pack filled with tools, the other holding a small device that emitted soft pulses of light. They were not tall like Valorans, but their posture was firm, their movements confident, as if nothing in this world could frighten them. The Valoran guards raised their staves. The human raised his hand slightly, showing he meant no harm. "We received your distress call," he said, his voice low and even. "This planet's atmosphere is unstable. You weren't kidding when you said you needed help." The translator sphere hummed, converting his words into the Valoran tongue. The council exchanged nervous glances. The High Speaker stepped forward. "We did not expect anyone to answer." "And certainly not humans." The man nodded. "Yeah, we get that a lot." There was no arrogance in his tone, only calm certainty. He looked at the sky, then at the trembling ground beneath his boots. "We'll need to see your atmospheric processors, your power grid, and any surviving data cores. If we can stabilize your oxygen balance, you might have a chance." The High Speaker blinked. "You can do that?" He gave a small shrug. "We'll try." "That's what we do." The humans set to work immediately. While Valoran engineers stood at a distance, the humans crawled through vents, opened panels filled with acid vapor, and carried machines that hummed and sparked. They seemed immune to fear, or maybe just used to it. At one point, a Velaran technician gasped when a human reached into a glowing reactor conduit that radiated lethal heat. "Stop! That will burn you!" she cried. The man looked at his gloved hand, flexed his fingers, and said, "Hey, it's fine. I've had worse." The Valorans stared in disbelief. To them, the humans looked like something out of legend and survivors shaped by chaos. Their suits were dented, their skin bore scars, and yet they smiled and joked as if the dying world were just another day at work. When night fell, the humans didn't rest. They built a temporary field generator using scrap metal and crystal shards. By morning, part of the city's air had become breathable again. The Valorans gathered to watch the sunrise, their eyes filled with tears. For the first time in months, they could step outside without masks. That night, the humans sat near the remains of their ship, eating small ration packs. A few Valoran children approached, curious. One small girl pointed at the stars and asked, "Is it true your world tries to kill you?" The human laughed softly. "Every day. We just got used to it." The girl frowned. "That sounds sad." He shook his head. "No, it means we learn fast. We adapt, we fight back. That's how we survive." The child's mother pulled her close, but the human smile was kind, not frightening. "You'll be fine," he said quietly. "We'll make sure of it." Behind him, the high speaker watched, unsure what to think. She had heard stories of Earth, of war, fire, and destruction. But these humans were different. Their strength wasn't cruelty. It was endurance. They didn't conquer to rule. They conquered to save. By the third day, Valora began to change. The air shimmered less with heat. The energy grid pulsed back to life. Cracked shields repaired themselves under the guidance of human hands. Still, some Valorans whispered in fear. What if they demand control after saving us? What if they bring their wars here? The high speaker listened to their worries. Then she looked out at the humans, dirty, exhausted, but still working tirelessly. She saw one of them lift a collapsed worker out of rubble with bare hands and carry her to safety without hesitation. "Those who survive Deathworlds," she said quietly, "do not seek power. They seek purpose." Late one evening, the human leader stood on the balcony of Tareth, staring at the sky. The high speaker joined him. "Your people, you don't seem afraid," she said softly. He smiled faintly. "We've seen worse skies. On Earth, the storms are louder, and the ground moves sometimes. Compared to that, this place feels almost peaceful." She studied him. "Why did you come?" "Our message was a weak signal. You could have ignored it." He turned to her, his eyes calm. "Because you asked for help, nothing more. No speech, no demand for reward, just those simple words." The high speaker looked out at the horizon. The dawn light shimmered faintly over the repaired fields, a sign that Valora still had hope. For the first time in centuries, her heart felt light. As the sun rose over the recovering city, the Valorans gathered to watch the humans march toward the next damaged site. Their armor caught the morning glow, reflecting the light like tiny suns. Someone whispered, "They are not monsters. They are fire, born from a cruel world, but they bring warmth where others bring fear." The humans had been on Valora for 9 days. In that short time, they had done what the Valorans once thought impossible. The skies were clearer. The heat storms had slowed. Energy flowed again through the floating city of Tareth. The people, once afraid to breathe without masks, now stepped outside and smiled under a calm sun. To the Valorans, it felt like a miracle. To the humans, it was just work. The human team, only 6 of them, moved across the city like a storm of their own. Their leader, the one the Valorans had come to call Commander, rarely rested. His armor was dented, his boots scorched, but his focus never wavered. He spoke little, but when he did, everyone listened. "Power flow's unstable," he said, tapping a cracked console. "We'll need a bypass, something to keep it steady when the next surge hits." A younger human, a woman with grease across her face, laughed. "You mean if the planet doesn't explode first?" He smiled faintly. "Exactly." The Valoran technicians nearby stared in awe. The humans worked as if danger was a game. Sparks flew. Heat alarms screamed. A pipe burst, releasing a burst of toxic gas, and one human simply turned off the alarm, held his breath, and tightened the valve with bare hands until it sealed. The Valoran scientists whispered to each other. How can they stand it? They don't even wear full protection. Do they feel pain differently? No one had answers. That evening, the high speaker invited the human team to a small dinner in the central hall. The Valorans wanted to thank them, to understand them. The hall was beautiful, built from crystal and light, but the humans looked strangely out of place. Their armor was scarred, their faces rough from dust and fatigue. Still, they accepted the offer politely. They sat on the floor, as was Valoran custom, and listened quietly as the high speaker spoke. "We are grateful for what you have done," she said gently. "Our people were ready to give up hope. You reminded us that life can still fight back." The commander nodded. "We didn't do much yet. The atmosphere's still unstable. You'll need another few weeks before the balance holds." One of the counselors, an elderly Valoran, looked at him curiously. "Tell us, human, what kind of world made you this way? You stand in fire and don't fear it. You breathe poison and call it not bad." The humans exchanged glances, smiling quietly. Then the commander answered, "Our home taught us to fight for every breath. Earth isn't kind. We grew up dodging storms, disease, hunger, and wars. We learned that fear doesn't save you, only action does." The hall grew silent. The Velerans listened, their luminous eyes wide with wonder. A young Veleran artist finally spoke. "And still you came to help us," the commander shrugged. "You asked. That's enough." After the meal, the Valorans walked with the humans to the outer balcony. From there they could see the wide silver seas below, dark and restless under the twin moons. Suddenly the ground trembled. A low rumble rolled through the air like distant thunder. The commander looked up sharply. "What's that sound?" One of the Valoran engineers answered nervously. "The deep storms. They come from beneath the crust. They form without warning and destroy everything in their path. We thought the last one passed a decade ago." Lightning crackled far off on the horizon. Purple clouds were gathering, swirling with violent energy. The commander's jaw tightened. "How long until it hits?" "Maybe 12 hours, the engineer whispered. He turned to his team. "Then we have 12 hours to make sure the shield grid doesn't fail again." The next few hours were chaos. The humans moved like machines, checking every node, reinforcing cables, and dragging heavy modules across the streets. Valoran workers tried to help but couldn't keep up. The humans moved too fast, too decisively. The storm grew closer. The sky darkened. Air began to shimmer with static. The first shockwave hit, shaking the city violently. Crystals cracked. Towers swayed. The high speaker called out, "We must take shelter." The last storm destroyed 3 cities, but the humans didn't run. The commander pointed to the western tower. "That's where the main generator is. If it fails, your entire city drops into the sea. We're not leaving it." The Valoran stared at him in disbelief. "You'll die if you stay there," he simply said. "Then we'll die doing something useful." Rain fell like knives. The sky turned violet and black. Energy surged through the air in glowing arcs. The humans strapped themselves into harnesses and climbed the tower, battling the storm itself. One was nearly blown off when lightning struck nearby. Another lost his tool pack to the wind, so he improvised, tearing metal from his own armor to patch a broken conduit. From below, Velerans watched in awe and terror. To them, the storm was death itself. To the humans, it was another problem to solve. "Hold that line," the commander shouted through the comms. "Pressure's rising." "Then vent it manually." They fought against nature for hours. At one point, a human engineer slipped and dangled hundreds of meters above the ground. The commander reached out, grabbed her arm, and pulled her back with sheer strength. She laughed breathlessly. "I owe you a drink for that," he grinned. "Just finish the job first." Inside the command center, the high speaker watched the energy readings spike and stabilize again and again. Each time she thought they would fail, the humans pushed harder. Her assistant whispered, "Why don't they stop?" She answered quietly, "Because they don't know how." By midnight, the storm was at its peak. Lightning tore across the sky in endless flashes. One bolt struck the tower directly. The humans were thrown to the ground, smoke rising from their armor. The Valorans screamed, but one by one, the humans stood again. Their suits flickered, but they kept working, eyes burning with focus. The commander ripped off a melted glove, his hand burned and shaking, and pressed it against the control pad. Manual override engaged. "Sir, you can't, your hand doesn't matter." "Keep it steady." The storm howled like a living thing. For 3 more hours, the humans held the line. When the power core finally stabilized, the clouds above them began to fade. The winds slowed. The rain softened into silence. And then the world was quiet again. When dawn came, the Valorans stepped outside to a city still standing. The air was clean. The shields glowed softly with restored power. The humans were found collapsed near the base of the tower, covered in burns and soot. They were alive, but barely. Valoran healers rushed to help using glowing salves and soft energy fields. The humans waved weakly, refusing to lie still. "Is it over?" one asked. The High Speaker nodded, tears in her eyes. "Yes, you saved us again." The commander smiled faintly. "Told you we'd fix it." Then he passed out. Later that day, as the humans rested in the medical bay, the Valoran Council met. "They risked their lives for us," said one. "No demand for payment, no expectation of praise." "They are dangerous," said another. "But not to us. To despair itself." The High Speaker looked toward the window where the sun rose golden over the repaired city. "The galaxy calls them Deathworlders," she said softly. "But maybe that name is wrong." By evening, the commander awoke. His body ached, his skin bandaged, but he was alive. The High Speaker stood beside his bed. "You could have left," she said quietly. "You could have saved yourselves." He looked at her with tired eyes. "And let your people die?" "Not how we do things," she smiled faintly. "You humans are strange." "Yeah," he said, chuckling. "We get that a lot." Outside, Valoran children ran under the sun, laughing freely for the first time in months. The air was filled with life again. The humans watched through the glass, their expressions soft and thoughtful. One of them said, "You think they'll be okay when we leave?" The commander nodded slowly. "They will be. They've seen what survival looks like now." That night, the Valorans gathered in the great square. They sang songs of rebirth, songs that shimmered through the air like light. When the humans appeared, the crowd went silent, then bowed deeply. The High Speaker raised her voice. "Once we feared the Deathworlders. We thought them wild, dangerous, and cruel. But they came to us not as destroyers, but as protectors. When the galaxy turned away, they came. And they stayed." The humans looked embarrassed by the praise, but they bowed slightly in respect. The High Speaker's final words echoed through the night. "May the stars remember that when Valora called for help, the Deathworlders answered." The crowd erupted in cheers, their luminous eyes reflecting the light of their saviors. High above, in the silent orbit around Valora, the damaged human ship waited. Its hull was blackened from entry, its systems barely holding together. But inside, a small screen blinked with incoming signals, new distress calls from distant worlds. The humans would leave soon. But for now they rested, because tomorrow someone else might call for help. The people of Valora believed the worst was over. The skies had cleared. The air was soft again. Children played under the twin moons, and the silver sea shimmered with new life. But deep beneath the planet's surface, something dangerous was stirring. The great storm that nearly destroyed Valora had not been a natural event. It was only a sign, a warning of something far bigger. The planet's magnetic core was becoming unstable. The very heart of Valora was breaking apart, and this time, no one in the galaxy could help them, except the humans. The commander stood inside the Valoran control center, looking at the holographic map floating before him. It showed deep cracks beneath the planet's crust, rivers of unstable energy flowing toward the core. One of the human engineers whistled softly. "That's bad. Really bad. How long do we have?" the commander asked. The Valoran scientist, her voice trembling, replied, "Days, maybe less. The core will collapse. When it does, the planet's gravity will implode. Everything will be gone." The High Speaker stared at the glowing image with empty eyes. "After everything you've done for us?" "After all we've rebuilt, we will still fall." The commander looked at her quietly. "Not if we can stop it." The plan was madness. Even the humans admitted it. Their small ship, Venture, still orbiting the planet, had a reactor strong enough to stabilize the magnetic field, but only if it was moved into the planet's crust and detonated in sync with the core's pulse. It would buy Valora time, perhaps centuries, but the process would destroy the ship and everything near it. The Valoran Council refused at first. "You cannot sacrifice your own vessel," the High Speaker said. "That is your way home." The commander only smiled faintly. Home is where someone needs help. His team stood beside him, silent but steady. They all knew the risks. Not one of them hesitated. The next morning, the city of Terath was filled with quiet movement. The humans prepared their ship for the final mission. Valoran workers tried to assist, but the humans took on most of the work. Themselves, they didn't want anyone else in danger. The high speaker came to the launch site as the humans loaded heavy energy cores onto transport sleds. "Please," she said softly. "There must be another way." The commander shook his head. "There isn't. If the core collapses, no ship will escape. At least this way, your world gets a second chance." She looked at the dark ship, the rough, scarred metal, the human flags scratched and faded, and whispered, "You came to save us. And now you'll die for us." He smiled a little. "We've died for worse causes." When the sun rose, the mission began. The Venture lifted slowly, engines roaring against the heavy wind. The Valorans gathered in silence, watching the ship disappear into the upper clouds. Inside, the human crew moved with purpose. They had done impossible things before, but this one felt different. There was no backup plan, no guarantee of survival. The engineer adjusted her headset. "If we drop this reactor core too close to the fault line, it'll blow before stabilizing." The commander nodded. "Then we'll do it right. No mistakes." Another voice came through the comms. "Sir, once we start, we can't come back. We'll burn up inside the crust." He looked out the window at the glowing blue curve of Valora. "Then we make sure it counts." Down below, the Valoran people stood on the balconies, looking at the sky. The high speaker whispered a silent prayer, though her people had never believed in gods. "Let them come back," she said. "Please." The Venture descended through the atmosphere. The heat shields glowed red, then white. The crew's suits tightened automatically to protect against pressure. Alarms screamed as the planet's gravity tried to crush them. "Stabilizers failing," one of the humans shouted. "Hold it steady," the commander ordered. The ship dove into the storming clouds, vanishing from sight. Lightning danced across the hull. The view outside turned to molten rock and fire. The temperature rose so high that the walls began to shimmer. Still, they pressed on. At last they reached the fault line, an enormous crack glowing with blue plasma energy. It was beautiful and deadly. The engineer looked at the readings. Core depth, 100 meters. Radiation level critical. "Deploy the reactor," the commander said. They released the reactor pod. It dropped into the glowing fissure, disappearing into the light. "Stabilization process starting," the navigator said. "Magnetic synchronization in 30 seconds. The ship shook violently. "Warning lights flashed everywhere. Core pulse rising." "Hold it," the commander shouted. "Just hold it." On the surface, the Valorans felt the tremor. The ground cracked, light bursting from beneath. For a moment, they thought the end had come. But then the light turned golden. The air rippled with energy, and the shaking began to slow. One of the scientists gasped. "It's working." The high speaker looked toward the sky, tears streaming down her face. "They're doing it. They're saving us." Inside the Venture, the heat was unbearable. Systems were failing. The hull screamed under pressure. The engineer shouted over the noise, "We need to pull out now." The commander looked at the readings. The synchronization wasn't complete yet. If they left now, the reaction would fail, and Valora would still die. He took a deep breath. "We're staying." His crew looked at him. No one argued. They tightened their harnesses, pushed the engines to full, and guided the reactor deeper. The shaking grew worse. Sparks flew. Panels burst open. Reactor at 95% synchronization. "Come on," the commander whispered. Just a little more. At last, the reactor locked into perfect sync. The readings stabilized. Valora's magnetic core began to glow with balanced energy. The storm clouds above started to fade. The commander sighed in relief. "It's done." But before anyone could celebrate, the ship's systems failed completely. The power grid overloaded. The engines went dark. "Sir, we're losing control." "Brace for impact." The Venture plunged downward, disappearing into the light. On the surface, the Valorans saw a streak of fire fall across the sky. It cut through the clouds, trailing sparks like a dying star. The high speaker covered her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. "No," she whispered. "Not like this." The light faded. Silence followed, and then a deep, soft pulse spread across the planet. The skies turned clear. The ground stopped shaking. The sea calmed. Valora had survived. Hours passed. Rescue drones searched for any sign of the humans. Nothing appeared. Many Valorans began to weep. Others lit small fires on the streets, singing songs of mourning. But then, just before dawn, a weak signal appeared on the comm channels. "This is Commander." "Venture." The voice was faint, cracked with static. "Reactor stable. Crew alive. But we're stuck." Cheers erupted through the city. A rescue team was sent immediately. The Valorans followed the faint signal to a deep canyon filled with smoke. There, half buried in glowing stone, lay the Venture, burned, broken, but intact. The humans were alive. When the rescue doors opened, the High Speaker herself ran forward. She found the commander sitting against the ship's hull covered in dust and burns. He smiled weakly. "Told you it was fixable." She knelt beside him, her luminous eyes shining. "You risked everything." He looked around at the clear skies. "Worth it." The other humans were pulled out one by one, tired but still breathing. The Valorans treated them with care, using every healing tool they had. That evening, the city of Tereth glowed brighter than ever before. People danced in the streets. The humans were carried through the crowds as heroes, though they looked embarrassed by the attention. One child handed the commander a small silver flower. "For you," she said shyly. He took it gently, his scarred fingers careful not to crush it. "Thank you." The High Speaker stood before the crowd and raised her voice. "Once we were afraid of the Deathworlders. We thought they brought only destruction, but today they gave their lives to save a world that was not their own. The galaxy may call them dangerous, but we call them family." The Valorans cheered, their voices echoing through the skies. The commander smiled softly at his team. "You hear that, family? Not bad, huh?" The engineer grinned. "Yeah, not bad for Deathworlders." That night, as the humans rested, the High Speaker visited them once more. "You could have left us," she said. "You could have chosen safety." The commander looked out the window at the calm sea. "Humans don't run from storms," he said quietly. "We walk through them," she bowed her head. "We will never forget you." He smiled faintly. "Just don't forget what you learned. Fight for your world. It's worth it." Far above, the stars shone brighter than ever before. The Valoran signal beacon sent out a new transmission. Not a call for help, but a message of gratitude. "To the galaxy. When we were lost, the Deathworlders came. They fought the storm and gave us life again. Do not fear them. Honor them." The storm had passed. The magnetic core was stabilized. Valora's cities, once cracked and dying, now shone with renewed light. The silver seas rippled gently, reflecting the twin moons like mirrors. The air was crisp, sweet, and free of the chemical tang that had once poisoned the skies. And yet, the High Speaker could sense unease. The humans had saved Valora, but their presence still unsettled many. Stories about Earth and its Deathworlders spread quickly. To some Valorans, humans were still monsters, not because of what they had done, but because of what they were: tall, rough, scarred, creatures born in chaos and violence. They should have been terrifying, and yet they had brought life where none remained. The High Speaker wondered, could her people ever truly understand them? The humans were recovering slowly. The Venture had survived, but barely. Its hull was patched with Valoran materials, its system sputtering. The crew, wrapped in healing wraps and energy field blankets, still insisted on helping wherever they could. The commander refused to stay idle. "If you're alive, you work," he said softly. "Sleeping too long won't fix your world." The Valorans watched in amazement. These humans had endured storms that would have destroyed any other species. They had risked death willingly, not for honor, not for reward, but simply because it was the right thing to do. By the third day, the city was bustling again. Repair crews moved like a tide, rebuilding damaged buildings, reinforcing streets, and planting new trees where burned ones had fallen. The humans joined them, guiding the Valorans with practical advice, tools, and systems salvaged from their own ship. A young Valoran engineer approached the commander. "Your methods, they are strange. Your hands are rough, yet your work is flawless." The commander smiled faintly. "We grew up on a planet where the ground itself tries to kill you. You get used to solving impossible problems with whatever is at hand." The engineer shook her head in disbelief. "And you do this calmly." "Always calmly," he shrugged. "Calm comes from knowing panic doesn't help anyone." Valora's children, who had once feared the skies, now ran around the human crew asking questions. "Did your storms hurt?" One small boy asked, his eyes wide. The engineer laughed. "A little, but not as much as your volcanoes, right?" The boy frowned. Our volcanoes are small. The commander joined them. Your world is still fragile. That's why we're here. To show you that even fragile worlds can survive if people don't give up. The children nodded slowly. They didn't fully understand, but they could see the truth in the humans' tired smiles and steady hands. The High Speaker decided it was time to formally recognize the humans. She organized a ceremony in the central square of Tereth. Velerans filled the plaza, their glowing bodies shimmering under the sun. Families brought gifts, crystals, small works of art, and woven lights. The humans were uncomfortable with the attention. They were not used to praise. They were used to action. Still, they accepted politely, their eyes scanning the crowd, always alert. The High Speaker raised her voice. These humans have come from a world you have feared for centuries. They have walked through storms that would have killed any other species. They have risked everything for Valora, not for reward, not for power, but because we asked for help. We owe them our lives. The crowd cheered, their voices ringing across the square. The humans bowed their heads humbly. A Veleran child approached the commander and handed him a silver flower. He accepted it with care. Thank you, he said quietly. Life on Valora slowly returned to normal. The cities flourished again. Children played, the seas shimmered, and the air was breathable. Yet the humans did not stay idle. They explored the world beyond Tereth, checking the magnetic field, stabilizing smaller cities, and teaching the Valorans practical survival methods. The Valorans had been peaceful for so long that they had forgotten how to defend themselves against natural disasters. The humans taught them to reinforce buildings, manage energy grids, and monitor storms. Your shields are beautiful, the commander said one evening, but beauty alone won't save your people. You need strength too. The Valorans listened, learning not only the techniques but the mindset. Humans survived because they refused to give up, no matter how impossible the challenge. One day, while inspecting a coastal city, a human engineer noticed a damaged levee about to collapse. Valorans, she shouted. If that breaks, this city floods. The locals froze, unsure what to do. The human didn't wait. She climbed onto the wall, bracing it with salvaged metal, and directed the workers. The Valorans hesitated at first, afraid of physical labor, but soon they joined her. By sunset, the levee was secure. The city was safe. A Valoran elder approached her afterward. You do not seem afraid of death or danger. How is this possible? She smiled faintly. Because we've seen it all before. Fear doesn't save anyone. Doing what needs to be done does, the elder bowed. You teach more than repair. You teach courage. At night, the humans gathered near the restored venture. We should leave soon, the commander said. Valora is stable. They don't need us to risk our lives anymore. The engineer shook her head. They learned from us. That's different. We've changed the way they will survive. The commander looked at the twin moons reflecting in the sea. It's always bigger than just one world. Someone always needs help, and we always go. The crew fell silent, each lost in thought. They had seen worlds die, fought storms that no one else would, and survived what seemed impossible. Yet they didn't boast. They just worked. As the days passed, Valora continued to heal. The forests grew back where fire had burned. Crystals that once fractured slowly mended under the humans' careful guidance. Rivers flowed freely, and the seas regained their silvery glow. The Valoran children often followed the humans, curious about their strange tools and scars. They asked questions endlessly. Why do your hands hurt? One asked. Because we use them, the commander replied. Why don't you cry when things are broken? Because crying doesn't fix anything, the engineer answered. And why are you smiling? Because we can fix it, the commander said quietly. The children thought about that for a long time. And slowly, they began to understand that strength was not only in their bodies or technology, but in their will to act, to endure, and to help. The High Speaker watched all of this in quiet amazement. The humans had come expecting nothing, given everything, and left an indelible mark on Valora. She realized that this was more than a rescue mission. The humans were teachers not of words or rules, but of courage, of persistence, of hope, and she knew that her world would never forget. One evening, as the humans prepared to leave, the High Speaker approached the commander. You've done more than save a planet, she said. You've changed the hearts of my people. They will remember you forever. The commander shook his head. We didn't come for thanks. We came because you asked. That's enough. She studied him for a long moment. I think your kind does not understand how extraordinary you are. He smiled faintly. Maybe not. But we understand why we do it. And with that, the humans boarded the venture, ready to return to the stars. But the people of Valora did not forget. Before they left, the Valorans built a small monument near the central square. It was simple. A statue of a human hand holding a crystal globe glowing faintly in the moonlight. The inscription read, "When we called for help, they came. Not for glory, not for reward. They came for life itself." The humans saw it as they left the planet. The commander paused for a moment and nodded quietly. "Not bad," he whispered. "Not bad at all." The venture lifted off, engines glowing, carrying the humans back into space. Behind them, Valora stood tall once more. A world reborn, alive, and stronger than before. The day had finally come. The humans were ready to leave Valora. The city of Tereth gleamed under the twin suns, its streets repaired, its towers restored, and the air crisp and clean. Valora was alive again, more beautiful than it had been for decades. The people gathered in the central square, luminous eyes reflecting the sunlight. Families held children in their arms. Scientists, engineers, and artists stood together, their hearts heavy with gratitude and awe. The high speaker standing atop the main platform raised her voice so everyone could hear. "People of Valora," she called. "Once we feared the Deathworlders. We thought them violent, unpredictable, and too dangerous to approach. Yet they came to us when all hope was lost. They risked their lives to stabilize our planet, to save our children, and to give us a second chance. And now they leave us, but their courage will remain forever." The crowd erupted into applause. Some cried, others cheered, and many simply stared at the humans in disbelief. The humans stood quietly beside the venture, scarred, tired, but steady. The commander looked at the crowd and said softly, "We didn't do this for praise. We did it because you asked for help. That's enough for us." A young Valoran child tugged at his sleeve. "Will you come back?" He smiled faintly. "We don't know. But if you ever need help again, we'll be there." The child's eyes widened. "Really?" "Really," he said. As the humans boarded the ship, Valorans brought gifts, crystals imbued with light, woven artifacts that sang softly, and small plants from the forest. The humans accepted politely, touched by the gesture but unfamiliar with such ceremonies. The high speaker stepped forward and presented a final gift. A small, silver medallion engraved with the planet's emblem. "For you," she said. "To remember Valora." The commander accepted it. "We'll remember," he said simply. The engines of the venture ignited. Fire and energy streamed from its rear, cutting through the sky. The ship lifted smoothly, leaving the silver seas and glowing forests behind. The crowd watched in silence as the humans disappeared into the upper atmosphere. Then as the ship cleared the clouds, the entire population erupted into cheers. Once in orbit, the commander looked at his crew. "We did it," he said quietly. "Valora is alive, and they'll survive." The engineer nodded. "They've learned from us, not just from our machines, but from our way of surviving. That's the real victory," another human added. "They'll never forget this, and maybe the galaxy will start to see us differently." The commander leaned back, studying the stars. "Let them see. Let them know that humans don't flee from death worlds. We walk through them." Across Valora, the people slowly returned to their daily lives. But they were changed. Children played in the fields with renewed energy. Artists painted the skies with glowing patterns. Scientists and engineers applied the lessons the humans had taught them, reinforcing structures, monitoring energy flows, and studying the magnetic core. And everywhere, they told stories. Stories of humans who came from a planet no one dared to visit, who laughed at danger, who risked everything for a world that was not their own. The legend grew quickly. Weeks later, in Tereth, the council held a special ceremony. A monument had been built in honor of the humans. It was simple but powerful, a large crystal globe held in the hands of a human figure. The hands glowed softly in the moonlight, symbolizing hope, strength, and sacrifice. The high speaker addressed the people. "This monument is not for power or glory. It is a reminder of courage, of perseverance, and of life itself. When we cried for help, the Deathworlders came. And they gave us more than survival. They gave us hope." The Valorans knelt before the statue. placing small gifts and glowing flowers at its base. Even children who could barely speak whispered the humans' names with awe. Back on the Venture, the humans drifted through space. Their ship was patched but still fragile. Their bodies ached from weeks of intense labor and exposure, yet their spirits were calm. The commander stared at Valora shrinking behind them. "Another world saved," he said softly. The engineer smirked. "You say that like it's just another day." He chuckled faintly. "For us it is. But for them, it's everything." They fell silent, drifting through the void. The stars stretched infinitely in all directions, a reminder of how many worlds might need help, and how little time there was to reach them. In the weeks that followed, word of Valora's salvation spread. Galactic news networks buzzed with rumors. Reports called humans reckless, unpredictable, and sometimes dangerous. But those who had witnessed Valora's rescue told a different story. "They are not monsters," said a Valoran diplomat during a galactic council. "They are the saviors we never expected. They walked through storms, faced death without fear, and gave us life again. Humanity is extraordinary." Across the galaxy, perceptions began to shift. Where humans had once been feared as Deathworlders, they were now being recognized as heroes. Meanwhile, aboard the Venture, the crew prepared for their next mission. "Where to next?" the engineer asked. The commander looked at the blinking signals on the control panel. "Somewhere someone needs help, and they will get it." A small laugh escaped from one of the crew members. "So we're never stopping?" The commander shook his head. "We survive because we move. We act, we help. That's who we are." Back on Valora, life continued to flourish. The magnetic core remained stable. Rivers flowed freely. Cities shone with light. Children laughed freely. And the stories of the humans, of the Deathworlders who came when no one else would, were told everywhere. From classrooms to marketplaces to the grand floating temples, the Valorans had learned something more important than technology. They had learned courage, resilience, and the meaning of hope. And the monument remained in the city's center, a constant reminder that when help is needed, the most unlikely heroes can appear. As the Venture disappeared into the stars, a final message was sent across the galaxy, using Valora's newly restored communication network. "We survived because the Deathworlders came. Fear them no more. Honor them. Humanity does not flee. Humanity endures." The message traveled light years in every direction, reaching countless worlds that had once dismissed or feared Earth. Some feared still, but many wondered, what other Deathworlders might walk among the stars? What other worlds might they save? And across the galaxy, hope began to shine again. The commander looked at the stars stretching endlessly ahead. "Another world," he said quietly. "Another chance to do what's right." The engineer smiled. "Sounds like a good life," he nodded. "It is, it's the only one we have."